Hello, we're going to do a safety demonstration on the bandsaw. I'm Mr. Decanic, tech ed teacher at Sandberg Middle School. Okay. Here's the bandsaw. A few safety things we need to take care of. One is safety glasses, worn at all times while working on and watching other people do it. Necklaces, sleeves pulled up, necklaces tucked in, sleeves pulled up, okay, and bracelets taken off, and long hair tied back. Some of the other one is we need to keep our fingers 4 inches away, 4 inches away from the blade. That is the diameter of this table insert. You need to make sure that all the wheel covers are closed. You need to clean off, make any adjustments while the machine is at a complete stop. You need to take off material, waste material, when the machine is at a complete stop. And that's just, those are the rules that we have right now for it. Okay? So now what we're going to do is do a demonstration. I'm going to go through some of the parts of the machine, and then we'll get into cutting. So we have an upper wheel cover, needs to be closed, and a lower wheel cover. The blade is a continuous band of teeth that looks similar to what I would call a bike chain. Okay, so once you turn it on, it's always in a cutting mode. It goes there. I'm going to leave this open for a second. Right here is a blade guard, and down here is a blade guide. We want to make sure that we adjust this to within 1/4 of an inch of the material being cut. To adjust that, we will turn this knob counterclockwise, bring it down slowly to our piece of wood, and then tighten it back up. So that's going to take care of the blade guard and blade guide. As we saw earlier, we have a table insert, which needs to be in place, and our fingers should not get inside that. We have a slot in the table that we should not stand in the way of. A blade could break and come through it and possibly scratch you. As we go down a little further and we look at underneath, we can loosen up the table so the table can tilt anywhere between 0 and 55 degrees. Okay, we bring it back up to 0, it'll just sit level. There's a stop on there, and we just tighten it back up. We have an on-off switch, so we'll push it, the green to go on and the red to stop it. You use your hand or use your knee. Now as we get ready to do some cuts, we'll start with some straight cuts, some cuts that get awfully close, our finger get awfully close to it, and how we can make that final cut. One thing I do want to remind you is that bandsaw blades do not cut real straight, so we're going to want to make sure that we have something that we can clean up our cut with. So a lot of cases it might be belt sander, Austin spindle sander, disc sander. Okay, could be a plane, depends on what you have around. But as we go to cut this, and put a little line here, we're going to cut. Okay, what we want to do is cut on what we would call the waste side of the line, the part that we're not going to use. And the part that we want, we're going to leave the line on so we can sand down to it. So in this case, I'm pretty much going to cut it in half. This here is about 1.5 inches wide that I want. This over here is waste. So 1.5 inches wide. And over here, this is all waste. So what I'm going to do is make sure that my blade is going to be outside of that line, because I want that line to cut with and to sand down or possibly hand plane down because that's the width that I want. And now as we go to do this, we want to set the blade guard and blade guide assembly about a 1/4 inch away. What I recommend is, the machine is off, loosen up the back handle, let the guard and guide assembly slide down, sit on my finger, tighten it back up, pull my finger up, and that is roughly a 1/4 inch. All we're doing is reducing the chance of possibly getting cut by the blade. If we leave it up, okay, my hand slides off or into it, I'm going to get a pretty good cut. So we want to make that adjustment. Plus also the guide does help keep the blade relatively straight, stiff, okay, in order. But as the blade gets duller, it'll start to wander a little more. So now as we go to cut this, I'm going to start back here, turn on the machine, I'm going to let it come to its full speed. I'm looking through the guard here. I have my safety glasses on. I'm going to turn it on, and as I'm going through this, we're going to look at 3 ways to finish this cut. So here we go, we're going to start cutting. I'm cutting the waist side. Cutting the waist side, I'm making sure I leave that pencil mark. That's what I want when I'm done. As I get to the back of this, I can do some pulling. If it's long enough or wide enough to the left side or right side, I can do a one-handed cut. And if I'm planning for it, I could have a piece of scrap material. But as I get ready to finish cutting this, I can go and I can push it through. And what ends up happening is I cut a piece of scrap wood and not my finger or thumb. So those are the 2 things that will be cut. It's either going to be pointer or thumbkin. When you're done with it, turn it off. These were long enough that I took the scraps away. As you cut smaller pieces, you're going to want to wait until they get, the machine comes to a complete stop. Another thing that's nice about it is a flexible blade is that we can cut arcs, circles, okay, shapes, whatever term you want to use on. Right now I have half a circle. Okay. What I want to be aware of is, as I'm cutting on here, and it comes from experience also to help, is that when I start cutting, I'm going to cut, the waist side is in here. The good part that I want is this right here. So this is going to be good, or keep it. This is waist. Is waist. So I want to make sure that falls away. But can I make this turn as I'm cutting? And as I'm making the cut, I'm going to, as it's cutting, I'm turning slightly and leaving the pencil line, because I'll take in this case probably the oscillating spindle sander or drum sander to finish that. But what I have drawn on here right now is what's called relief cuts. So if you're not sure if you can make it, depending on what your blade is there, you're going to make relief cuts. So it's a series of cuts that go roughly 90 degrees to the surface and it stays back a little bit. And once I've done all my cuts, then I'm going to start cutting. You'll see how they fall apart so I can have the blade turn. So relief cuts, this is called. Come in here, I'm not sure I can make it, so I'm going to start doing some cutting here. Going straight in, and I can back it straight out. I'm being very careful backing straight out. Now just because I drew some lines on there, doesn't mean you need to follow them. That was just an example of how this should look on a release cut setup. So again, I have left them short. I'm going to come in, and as I'm cutting, I'm going to run into that piece there. It's going to become loose. I can now turn the blade a little more. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to make it easy to turn. You're not sure what's taking place. I want to make sure I decide that, can I make that swing or can I not make that swing? You have a lot of experience on it and understand the bandsaw a little more. You might just be able to, what I do here is, get it cutting, and as I'm cutting this, I'm going to turn the wood as I'm cutting. Similar to steering a bike around the corner of a street. And I have to turn before I get to where I want to be. And then finish the cut. And again, I'm leaving some material to be taken out because this is the line that I want. It may not be real straight right now. I can use a compass to do it straighter, but this is the shape that I would want, so I would then take it from this point and go to my sander nets. I want to complete all my cuts. So we've talked about straight cuts and we've talked about curved cuts. In making curved cuts, if you happen to need to back out, you need to turn the machine off and back out of the curved cut. Otherwise, we might have a very high chance of pulling the blade forward off the wheels. Okay? It'll sound like something just broke and sprung apart. The blade will stop moving, has to be turned off, and has to be reset with the tension. Turn the tension down and put it back. On straight cuts, it's a little easier to back straight out and cut straight in. Move that in and out. So, the bandsaw, good machine to use for doing tight cuts, small cuts. It works a little better than having to use try to get the table saw to work, whichever, very similar to a jigsaw. So again, the bandsaw, be safe, keep your fingers away, wear your safety glasses, keep any materials or necklaces or shirts away from it, and enjoy using the bandsaw in creating projects.